Hello and welcome to the Living Your Best Life webinar series presented by the Huntsman World Senior Games. This is a monthly webinar that covers a wide variety of topics that are designed to help you live your best life. My name is Kyle Case, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Huntsman World Senior Games. Now, on to our expert presenter. We're very excited to welcome Dr. Jared DuPree, who will discuss effective ways to develop goals and pursue passions in a manner that aligns with your true self, leading to long-term outcomes. We thought with the new year coming, understanding methods of forming effective goals that will actually excite and encourage one's life would be time well spent. Dr. DuPree has provided counseling, coaching, and consultations to executives, couples, individuals from all around the world for more than 2 decades, and we're excited that he would join us today. Welcome, Jared. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Good to see you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate your time and we appreciate your willingness to share your expertise. Just to get us started here, I don't want to let any cats out of any bags, but I got to ask this question. Is it possible to set goals that actually stick?
Yes, absolutely. I think, there's a history of us setting goals that don't usually stick.
I know I have a history. I know I have that history.
Yeah, and definitely that's what I want to address today. So we'll definitely dive into some things that will help you actually set goals that will actually stick, like you say.
Well, coming up on the ending of one year and the beginning of another, it's certainly a time when we all kind of reflect on the things that we wanted to do and maybe the things that we also are looking forward to doing next year. So without any further ado, Jared, I'm going to turn the time over to you. We're excited to get your content. As I said, if you have questions as we go along, those that are joining us, please pop them in the Q&A or in the comments section. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll pop back on and Jared and I will discuss your questions. So Jared, again, thank you for your time. Looking forward to learning from you, and we'll turn the time over to you and just go from there.
Great, thank you. Well, like Kyle was saying, I am very happy to be here, and it is a topic that is commonly, addressed around this time of year. And if you're like me, I've set hundreds of goals probably over the years, and not always followed through with those goals. And I think it's a common challenge, roadblock that we have. And a lot of my background, my profession has been in counseling or coaching. And it's very common when you start meeting with someone to set goals. And so you become very familiar with, what patterns, what methods, what tools seem to work better for people to set goals and actually accomplish those. Obviously, when you're working in a counseling situation, some of those goals can be pretty heavy, and oftentimes involves some really big challenges. Equally in coaching, I've done a lot of coaching and consulting throughout the years. There's less heavy goals, but I find that whether it's a heavy topic or more business, professional, family, relationship oriented type goals, that there's common principles that help us actually accomplish goals much more effectively. So I'm going to actually give you the 4 principles, in my opinion, that help you establish goals that will actually be accomplishable. I don't know if that's the word, but you know what I mean. And then I'll remind you at the end of the presentation as well. But some of these might sound strange in some way. I think will all come together in the end. But I have found that these 4 principles or areas seem to be the biggest bang for the buck. There's hundreds of things that we can do to improve our ability to set goals and accomplish those. But seeing this over and over and over again throughout the 2 decades of work that I've had, these 4 principles seem to be really important. So number 1, what's principle number 1? Principle number 1 is what I call remember your season. I'm going to go in depth on each of these, but I want to give you them ahead of time. So number 1, remember your season. Number 2, find your intrinsic motivators. And I will obviously talk quite a bit about that today. And of the 4, I think that's probably the most important, is number 2. Number 3, I know a lot of you probably have heard the acronym SMART goals. I do think that's an effective way to get to the nuts and bolts of actually accomplishing goals once they're set, and setting them in a way that are accomplishable. So we will talk about what SMART goals are. It's number 3. And then number 4 is more of a statement and based on a principle as well, but basically goals should serve you, not the other way around. And we'll get to that as well. But those are the 4 principles. So I'm going to give you the ending of the book at the beginning, and then we'll go through it. Remember your season, find your intrinsic motivators, use the tool of SMART goals, that's number 3, and then 4 goals should serve you, not the other way around. So let's talk about number 1, remember your season. You know, it's interesting. Obviously, we're in the winter season, starting it. Actually, that's not true. I guess technically it starts December 21st. So next week, it's winter solstice, darkest night of the year, longest night of the year, opposite of the summer solstice in summer. And it is interesting that almost every culture that's existed throughout the world pays very close attention to seasons. And it makes sense. We have agricultural reasons for that. Obviously, with weather changes and things, we adjust. We live in a society with holidays, with Christmas and other Hanukkah and other types of holidays coming up pretty soon. But what does it mean to remember your season? Well, it's interesting. There's actually an old word that's not really used very much anymore. It's called saeculum. It's spelled S-A-E-C-U-L-U-M. And it was a term used back in the day that referenced the seasons of a civilization. That each civilization would go through the spring, summer, fall, winter of their civilization and repeat the cycle. And equally, individuals go through seasons, the saeculum. The saeculum is a full 4 seasons. So there's the spring, summer, fall, winter of a person's life. Now, you could tie this to age. I don't think that's always the case. But traditionally, the spring of someone's life is kind of that birth to early 20s period, 2025-ish. And we know the season of spring, what that means, and it fits very well with that age. And then the summer, one's life is at 25 to 50. And that 25 to 50 is a very active, you're in work mode, raising kids, all that type of thing, season. Then around 50-ish, depending on the person, we start to move into the fall season of someone's life. That's where we start to slow down. Not in a way that suggests we are slower, but it means that we start to shift our energy. And the fall period, especially in a lot of these older cultures that talked about the saeculum, suggested that the fall period of a person's life was a time when people started looking to give back. They've developed expertise, they've raised a family, they've gained wisdom through their experiences, and this is a time to start to give back. And then as you get to the winter of one's season, it's a time to reflect. You think about winter. I live in the mountains, and there's no leaves on the trees. I have a creek on my land. It's really common for me to take a walk in the woods, quiet, and I reflect on the year, reflect on my life. And winter gives us a chance to reflect. Now, in psychology, there's other models too that equally talk about seasons. They call them developmental stages. The most famous being Erik Erikson's stages of development. And that's something you can definitely Google. There's lots of YouTube videos and information on that. But equally, what Erik Erikson says is during these different seasons, we have certain tasks to accomplish. And these tasks surround certain challenges that we all experience. And he calls those normative stressors. Normative stressors are stressors that anyone going through life would experience. The stress of going through school, the stress of getting a job, of working at a job. Those are normative stressors. Then we have what's called non-normative stressors. Non-normative stressors are things that aren't typical. It can happen to anyone, but we don't really plan for them. Someone getting a chronic illness or passing away or losing a job. These are all things that definitely can happen, but they don't happen to everyone. And Erik Erikson, what he believed was that these normative and non-normative stressors can do one of two things. During your stage or season, the hope is you use that season, that stage, to push through the challenges, to grow, to develop, to progress. And the belief that he had is if we can do that, then we are able to move into the next season or the next stage. If we don't, we get stuck until we do. And in counseling, it's not uncommon, honestly, to work with a client that's gotten stuck at a very early stage. And usually that's some type of trauma or significant event. But regardless, what it represents to me is if we don't accomplish the purpose of that season, we end up swimming over and over again, cycling over and over again in that season. And so when we talk about remembering your season, it's really getting a good sense of your purpose right now. You're all in different seasons. I'm in a certain season, you're in a different season. I mentioned the one spring, summer, fall, winter. That's basically 4 stages. Erik Erikson's has, I can't remember, 7 or 9. I should know that, but it's around 7 or 9 stages. There's other cultures. Almost, every culture has these stages. You even look at Native American culture, and I'm sure some of you have heard about these rituals or ceremonies that people go through when they move from adolescence to adulthood, or having a first child, or moving into death. They had ceremony, ritual for each of these seasons, and they tied it a lot to nature. It's interesting. I was going to show you something. This is kind of cool. I don't carry dollar bills very much, but I did bring one today. And I don't know if you can see this, you probably can't, but right underneath the pyramid, I don't know if you've ever looked at what it says. It says Novus Ordo Seclorum. It's Latin for the new way of the saeculum. I was mentioning that saeculum. When the founding fathers came to the United States, this idea of saeculum was actually more common. And there's this idea that, we've had these seasons, these stages of England, of Europe, and we're going to start a new one. We're going to start a new civilization, a new order, a new way of having these seasons. And so even on the dollar bill, it's a reminder of these seasons. And why is it so important to remember your seasons when you think about goals? Well, what happens if you make a goal that's tied to a season that you really aren't in anymore? Obviously, it's not going to work out. You're going to fight at it and push up against it and all these different things. But it's really not going to work out because you're not in that season. It's like trying to plant in winter, or it's trying to harvest in spring, Although in St. George, you can sometimes do that because you have different growing seasons. I've discovered that in St. George. But the idea, the principle of the matter is each season has a purpose. And really what this principle of remembering your season is suggesting is discovering the purpose that you have right now in the season you're in. The season before, or 2 seasons before, in certain purposes. I've worked with lots of clients that are still living in an older season. A common one is when we have kids and we spend so much time helping them grow and develop, and then they leave the house and empty nesters, right? We put so much energy and love and time into this season, and some people get stuck in that season. They even lose a sense of purpose. They start to get even depressed sometimes because they still want to be in that role of parenting those children when they're now even parenting maybe their own children. It's not a bad thing. It happens, in all honesty, on some level to everyone. But what do we do about that? Well, we appreciate. We have gratitude for the season that we're in. And then we move into this new season and discover the purpose of this season. So as you think about setting goals, really what you're asking yourself is not what goals to set. Really what you're asking yourself is, what is my heart, my compass, my soul, my spirit, whatever you want to call it, tell me is my season, my purpose, my core? And can I use that to discern my decisions? And what I say yes and no to. One of the biggest challenges I see with clients is one of 2 things. Either they don't know their core, their spirit, their soul, their heart, based on the season they're in. So obviously the focus then is to get to know it, know what that is, or they haven't aligned it. What I mean by that is, do they use this core to make decisions in their relationship, in their work or their retirement, with their kids or their grandkids, with their money decisions, all these things? Are they using that core? Is it in alignment? Or are you using an old compass that really needs to be revamped because you're in a different season? So that's number 1. Remember your season. Just a side note, I think some of you might find this interesting. This has nothing to do about today's topic, but it's kind of a cool idea. So this idea of saeculum, gets applied to civilizations too, right? And there's a bunch of historians that have actually studied this. It's basically historical psychology. And they've looked at the civilization of the United States. And they discovered that, about every 20 years, we go through this new season. And then we repeat. So there's like a spring, summer, fall, winter of each season. The cool thing is, I don't know, all seasons have their benefits, their pros and cons, I guess. But if the last 500 years have been correct, and we're following the same pattern, then we're actually just barely leaving the season of winter in the United States and starting spring again, which I think is kind of cool. We've had a lot of hard times lately, COVID, economic things, and that's part of the winter period. It's kind of a crisis, tower falling, things getting turned over, it's a death. And then comes the spring. So I think that's cool that if history repeats itself, and we've been pretty consistent over 500 years of recording, looking at this, then we're just barely entering the spring season for the next 20 years. So anyways, so number 2, find your intrinsic motivators. So this is a good piggyback onto this remember your season. It's this idea of, finding your core. Well, what does the core mean? Well, the problem with goals is if we aren't motivated to accomplish those goals, it's not going to work out. And so goal setting is really more of an issue of motivation than the actual goal. And there's two types of motivations or motivators. There's intrinsic motivators, extrinsic motivators. So extrinsic motivators, meaning external, are things that either are a stick or a carrot. What we mean by that, you get poked with a stick, right? Or you dangle a carrot. It's real similar to the reward or punishment approach in parenting, you know. It's either you punish to get someone to do something or you give them reward, right? What does the research say about extrinsic motivators? Well, this is probably one of the most robust social science findings ever, and probably one of the most least followed, especially in the business world. I do a lot of consulting in the business world, and the Federal Reserve has even done studies on this. Oxford University did several major studies on this, and it's been repeated over and over again. What are the findings? Well, if a company uses extrinsic motivators to motivate their employees, quality goes down, motivation goes down, productivity goes down, except in situations where the type of work is repetitive and mundane, doesn't require critical thinking. So factory work, doing the same thing as he passes on the line. Extrinsic motivators actually do work for that type of work. But the reality is most of the society is not doing that type of work. Extrinsic motivators actually reduce innovation, creativity, productivity, all these different things. Equally, intrinsic motivators, what are those? Those come from inside. What would be an example of an intrinsic motivator? I do something because I love to do it. I'm into it. I'm passionate about it. This is real common with Huntsman Senior Games. Why do people come? Is it really for the trophy? I mean, for the medal, I should say, it's the medals. For some people it is. But in reality, I think most people come because they're passionate about their sport, right? Equally, they're passionate about the community. That's another intrinsic motivator. I want to do this because I want to connect with people that are important in my life. The other common intrinsic motivator is I want to do something because I feel like it's going to help me personally grow in a way that I want to. Yeah. Once again, you apply this to business, you use intrinsic motivators to motivate employees. What does it show? There's hundreds of these studies. And there's a great TED Talk, by the way. If you want to look up TED Talks, intrinsic motivators, it's like I think it's like the third top most watched TED Talk of all time. He does a really good job of explaining a lot of the research on this. But what does the research show? Yeah, everything goes up. Creativity, productivity, quality of life, etc. When I consult for companies, actually I did one just recently. I'll give you an example. I'll change some things to protect confidentiality. I was down in Texas working with a company, and I was interviewing, excuse me, I was interviewing all employees, trying to figure out their state of whether they like working for the company and all those types of things. And it was so interesting because they had really good people. They really did. But a number of them were just so close to leaving. And it wasn't because of money. It had nothing to do with it. They were paid pretty well. It was an extrinsic motivator. I remember talking to one guy, and I asked him, let's not talk about work for a bit. What are you into? What do you like? What do you get passionate about? What do you get excited about? He said, you know what? I've always wanted to go to Croatia. And I look stuff up every year and try to go, but I never have time because of work, because if I leave, things fall apart here. And to be honest, I've really been thinking about just taking a sabbatical or leaving for 6 months, just because I can't not go. Right? And so he was really thinking about quitting. This is a big position for this company. It would hurt them if he quit. And I said, well, what if you had a week or two to go to Croatia? I mean, how would you feel about that? He said, oh yeah, I mean, that would do it for me. I talked to the CEO. I said, I don't know if you know this, and I need to be always careful with sharing what needs to be shared. By I talked to this employee, and he was okay with it. Said, you need to give this guy a bonus. He deserves one. He's done great work, and pay for a trip to Croatia for a week and a half, and he's going to be loyal to you forever. And that's what they did, and it was just amazing. He was just floored. It was a lot less than what a bonus would look like for him. But the fact that first of all, someone would consider his intrinsic motivator and then do something about it, boom, wow, now he's solid with the company. And it's the same thing in life. What are your intrinsic motivators? What really gets you going? And this can relate to season. There's certain intrinsic motivators that change. Oftentimes our intrinsic motivators when we're working and having kids and raising kids and that type of thing is much different than when we have more space to do other things. And it's a really common time for people to start new hobbies and new interests and explore different things because they have the space now to do it. I think it's another reason why Senior Games does so well. It gives people a chance to tap into that intrinsic motivator. That time period in their life when they connected with that physical movement, that sport. Maybe that was carried through on some level throughout their whole life, but now they have this space to do that. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. But that's the key. If you can find your intrinsic motivators, what really drives you, what really gets you going, what helps you be passionate, and create goals that stem from those, the chance of that goal being accomplished goes up 10 times. It's like the most important of these 4 principles. It's really important to tie your goal to something that you love or that you believe in, or that you're passionate about, or you really want to do something to personally develop because you want to. If you have a goal tied to something like that, you're going to look forward to it. Guess what happens if you create a goal that's not that? You get resentful about it. You actually start to hate it. And then you become apathetic. Those goals don't work out so much. I used to work a lot with weight management and chronic illness. I still do on some level. I have clients that see me for that. And it's always the same thing, do people really want to lose weight? I mean, they do. But when you really get down to it, there's usually something underneath that. Some people will want to lose weight because of societal expectations or pressures or to look a certain way, all extrinsic, right? But if you can start tapping into intrinsic reasons for losing weight, for example, I want to be healthy enough to play around on the ground with my grandkids. Awesome. That's a great goal. So your goal is not to lose weight. Your goal is to play with your grandkids on the ground and have fun with them. And weight just happens to be one piece of the pie along the way to get there. So now when you help create goals around weight, you're not really doing it around weight. You're doing it around this place with grandkids or whatever it might be. That's another example. So you have to get creative. Sometimes with these intrinsic motivators. But the real key here is just making sure that you tie it to something real. I don't know if you have heard of the story behind the word sincere. We talk about goals being sincere or authentic. And it references basically this idea of being intrinsic, these intrinsic motivating goals. And to be honest, I later found out the story is not real, but I like the message. So I'm going to share it with you anyways. I think there's a version of the story that's true, but I think it's gotten twisted over the millennium, and it's a story that's not completely real, but still, it's a great story. So the word sincere, I don't know if any of you speak Spanish or Latin. We've brought Latin in already today. But in Spanish, the word sincere is sincera. I don't know if you know what that means, but sin, S-I-N, means without. And cera, C-E-R-A, means wax. Makes no sense without wax. Why would that mean something related to sincere? Well, the story goes that back in the day, the Romans would go to the Greeks to buy statues to put in their gardens. And if the Greeks created a statue and it cracked with marble or whatever, rather than starting all over, they would cover those cracks with white wax to make sure, to make it look like there's no blemish. And then the Romans would take that Greek statue, come back to the Roman garden, put it out in the sun. Eventually the wax would melt and they go, oh, shoot, I bought a bum statue. And so eventually the Greeks would start advertising, their statues, that they had statues without wax, or sincera, which eventually became sincere. And what does that mean for us today with sincere? A sincere goal, an intrinsic motivating goal, means it's real. You're not meeting someone else's expectation. You're not doing it for your spouse or your family or society or religion or government. It's because of you. It's really important. It's a great opportunity each time of year to reflect. Isn't it beautiful that this time of year is around winter, this time of reflection, that season? But to reflect on who you are for real. And let the shame go, if there is any, or guilt, or sadness. And none of those things are wrong. But if they're becoming wax, covering our true selves, we allow that to come away. And so in the end, we all have good, bad, ugly. And the bad's not really bad. We just all make mistakes. And we all have challenges, and we all struggle and get through things. That's okay. That's part of why we're in this life, I think. But it's recognizing it's okay. It's okay. That's part of who we are. And it's being very real with ourselves and saying, am I willing to live my compass? Make a goal that aligns with that. And if you do, you're actually going to look forward to it. You're going to be excited about it because it's something that you want to do. And I find that if you make goals that really tap into your heart, your core, your compass, they're transformational. And that's the key here. Why do we make goals? Why do we have seasons? Why do we evolve? I think what our natural humanity desires is to expand our hearts, our community, our relationships, our understanding, our knowledge. And we do have this internal spark of expansion. And each of you has a unique version of that. Tap into it. We need it so much right now, especially in the world of today, especially in this time of moving from winter to spring. In the Saculum theories, the spring is one of the largest periods of creativity. New ideas, blooming, new plants coming up, birth. We need your wisdom, your experience. Be true to yourself and make goals around that. Number 3, this is an easy one. You've heard of this before, some of you. SMART goals. It's an acronym. It stands for S, specific, M, measurable, A, attainable, R, realistic, T, timely. Specific. I don't want to make a goal that I'm going to be more happy this year. That's great. I want you to be happy. It's really loose and wide and big. Something specific. I'm going to go hiking 2 times a week, measurable. For hikes that are 2 to 5 miles, attainable. Maybe your mileage is higher than mine. I don't know. Realistic. Yeah, that probably fits my schedule. Timely. I'm taking this every 2 times a week. You see that? Now, does that mean that's going to be the answer to my happiness? Not necessarily, but if that's tied to something that helps me feel happiness, hiking or whatever, that smart, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely type of goal, smart goals, makes it more doable. It provides logistical operations for it to actually occur, if you want to look at it from a business term. And sometimes we need that, especially if we're doing something that we're not used to. And that's why another reason why goals don't always work out is because we're trying to form a new habit. We're trying to condition our body, our nervous system, our brain, our emotions to do something different. How long does it take? Well, the research says if you do something like really disciplined, you're just on it for 30 days, the brain will change in that amount of time, which is connected to everything. Most of us don't have the discipline, to be honest, including me. So for most people, it's 90 days. What does that mean? Day one, you're not going to like it so much. You might like the idea of it. You might still be intrinsically motivated, but your body, your nervous system, whatever, is not used to it. So you have to push through it. By day 30, they say that 50% of it's done. So that's good to know. And by day 90, it's about 90%. Now, for it to reach 100%, it's about a year. But you've already reached the tipping point by that point. So I always say, if you make a goal, shoot for doing it for at least 90 days. And if you need to adapt or evolve after that, then do it. Which leads into number 4. Goals should serve you, not the other way around. You're not here to make a goal and be a slave to it. The reason you set a goal is that the goal should serve you. I was working with a client yesterday, on the phone. I work with a lot of surgeons. Surgeons have a lot of burnout and they have a lot of stress these days, lots of pressures. And he had set this goal of retirement at age 55. He's very burned out right now. He's got 5 more years. And we talked about it. I said, I understand the goal of 55 and you have these financial goals and all these different things. He's doing fine financially. But he was so set on his goal that he had become a slave to his goal. And I said, let's think about why you even set the goal. What's the purpose of the goal? Let's step back and look at the big picture. And then we had this discussion about, the reason I wanted to do it this time, this 55, is I felt at that moment that would be a time when I can start moving more into a more relaxed state. Because he felt that he still had the energy and motivation to keep going. That had shifted already. And so we started rethinking. He basically was saying, I need to match my goal with where I'm at in my season. This season has shifted already. He had already wanted to start to slow down, which is fine. And so we started shifting. And it's really common for people to get stuck on the success failure thing. I set this goal, I can't let myself down or whoever, so I'm just going to do it no matter what. I'd be careful with that. Doesn't mean you give it up completely, but what I would suggest is if the goal doesn't feel in alignment anymore, then you adjust the goal as you evolve and transform. I don't think you get rid of the goal. There's a reason you had it in the first place. But I would recommend revisiting your goals and adapting and evolving them to fit the season, path, place that you're in, so you don't become a slave to your goals. So let's recap. The purpose of today's webinar is to look at principles that will help you set goals that will actually stick or last, right? Number 1 is remember your season. If you make goals outside of your season, they're not going to work. What does that mean? You got to think about your purpose in your life right now. Get a big picture sense what you really are wanting and needing, and what role, what place you have, what part you have to play in the planet and your family and everything that fits your season. You need to have that. I think a lot of you probably do. It's a great time of year to refine it if needed. Number two, tap into your intrinsic motivators. Make goals that are tied to things that you believe in, that you love, that you're into, that help you personally grow because you're into it, you want to do it. Those types of goals are fun. Look forward to them. Don't create goals that are based on extrinsic motivators, outside expectations of others, rewards, punishments that are external. They're not going to work. Research is really clear. Unless your goal is around a factory type of goal, which I'm doubting that's what it is. But anything else won't work. Create SMART goals. Get them specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. That can help the rubber meet the road type of idea. Actually get you going. And then make sure your goals serve you, not the other way around. You don't want to become a slave to your goals. Once again, you don't want to resent your goals. Your goals should serve you. So if you need to realign or adapt or tweak your goals, that's okay. It's not a failure or success thing here. Just be honest with yourself. There's a difference between giving up on a goal because you're tired and it's challenging. That type of goal, you might adjust the pace or the way you're doing it, versus it's just not in alignment anymore. And that's okay. Sometimes goals are stepping stones into other goals. And maybe you accomplish that goal in a different way than you expected. You close the loop and you move to another goal. That's okay. So hopefully that's helpful. Those are some final things I wanted to share. I'd like to have Kyle come on and ask or any questions that have come up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, let me just say again, thank you, Jared, for your time and your expertise. You've definitely opened my eyes and my thought process in a variety of different ways. The first one is I had never heard this concept of the saculum. That's brand new to me. That's not a word that I was familiar with. I feel like I have a reasonable vocabulary, but that was not a word I had ever heard before. But I am fascinated with this all of a sudden, this concept, the cycle, the seasonal aspect of things. I love that. And as I feel like I didn't have words for it before, but as you've talked about this, I feel like I'm starting to enter into a new season of my life. And now I can kind of articulate what that is. We have a brand new grandson, first time grandparents. Professionally, I'm in a great place. But I feel like I'm entering this new season. And I love that you said, as you enter these new seasons, it's not about leaving something behind and forgetting all the experience or the great things that have happened, all the things that have brought you to this. It's an energy shift. Yeah. And I really like that. I really like that concept. And I like, just being connected with the Huntsman World Senior Games. It feels like so many of our athletes that I get to learn from and watch their example are now, in this fall time, this fall season, where they're really focused on giving back. And I see that not only with our athletes, but I see that very clearly with our volunteers. They've reached a point in their life where they're able and they're capable and they're willing to give back. And we see that so often. And then I love that concept of winter as well, which is a time of reflection. And again, I see that, that process. I think it's interesting too. You tell me your thoughts on this. We talk about these seasons, but it feels like you can still benefit regardless of the season that you're in from each of the other seasons. Is that fair to say? So even as we find ourselves in a certain season in our lives, it feels like, at least for me, it feels like you're still capable and able to draw on the experiences from the other seasons. So for example, you find yourself in the fall season of your life, which is the time, as you said, we can give back. but you can still draw on the creative energy of spring and the kind of got to get things done work ethic of summer and still enjoy the fall. Have you found that to be true, or is that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the hope. We don't want someone to forget their past or their seasons. It's actually what brings them to the, using their talents the most in the season given is relying on the previous seasons.
Yeah.
There's two mistakes. On the one side of the continuum is getting stuck in a season, so not ever leaving spring.
Right.
It's the guy that is always the high school quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Springsteen glory days analogy,
Yes,
right?
exactly. The other side of the continuum, the opposite, is you become so focused on the present of trying to fit in to the current civilization and culture that you forget your seasons. You forget the history and experience and past that we as a culture need to hear.
Yeah.
We have to have both.
Yeah. I love that concept. That's one that I'm going to meditate on and maybe do a little research on. We do have some great questions. Several of them kind of overlap just a little bit and
Okay.
align perfectly with one of the questions that I have. And that is this concept of the seasonality, I guess. Is there a way to have a goal that's maybe a lifelong goal that you can adapt as you move into the different seasons?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's really common. In therapy, there's a term called process versus content. It basically means that the content is the topic of the discussion or the topic of the goal or whatever it is. And the process is the patterns and principles underneath. So for example, someone can get super stuck on a content goal of losing weight's a common one, right? People set goals all the time to lose weight.
Sure.
That's a content area. If I have a goal of wellness, because I have this principle of wellness from, early on throughout my whole life, well, that's going to shift and that's going to change and evolve. And so if you can get to the principle of the matter of your goal, and that really ties once again to those intrinsic motivators, which in many ways are tied to your values, the things that are most important to you. And that's another way to consider your intrinsic motivators is to sink into what's important and then allow that with your compass to create, in the way that it needs to be experienced in that season. So I'm very big into principle-based goals and let those principles exist through your whole life and let the content or the way they come out shift.
That's interesting. Just again, connected with the World Senior Games, I'm going to try to run an analogy here and you tell me how far off I am. But let's say I'm trying to give an example of how you might modify your goals as you shift through your seasons. So let's use cycling as an example. Yeah. To me, it feels like the springtime is the time when you discover cycling. You learn how to ride a bike, you get those training wheels, and then you take those off and you figure out if I'm a road cyclist or if I'm a mountain biker. It's that time of discovery. Mm-hmm. The summertime might be, I'm going to win these races. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to train hard. I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to get my legs strong. I'm going to get my legs strong, and I'm going to win these races, right?
Yeah.
The fall time might be the time that's when the World Senior Games comes in, where of course you're still going, you're trying to do your best, but those times, as we get older are going to get a little bit slower. It's less about I've got to win this no matter what. And it's more about how can I connect with my fellow athletes? Yes. And how can I be a resource to them? And how can I learn from them? And how can there be some interaction and some give and take? And then the winter kind of continues on that idea, but it's where you share your wisdom. And this is what I've learned over my career. And this is how I can help you. Is that a fair analogy of kind
Yeah,
of taking a goal through seasons?
yeah. No, I love that. And another thing to think about the fall season is it's all about the harvest. And if you think about the harvest, it is harvesting all the work that you've put in, and it's always done in community.
Yeah.
You don't harvest alone. You don't harvest all these things and just eat them in a closed, closet or something. It's shared.
Yeah.
And it's celebrated. A lot of the cultures of the past, some of the biggest celebrations were around the harvest. And that's what reminds me of the fall season, like in the cycling example, is this is a time to connect with community. It's a time to, really create a synergy of this type of connection in a world that's very disconnected right now.
Yeah, for sure. A couple of other questions, again, a little bit of overlap here. Let me see if I can ask this in a way that will maybe answer the multiple questions that we received. It's about this external versus internal, intrinsic versus extrinsic. A couple of comments about how maybe I tend to find myself, it's easier for me to identify and articulate an extrinsic goal, but how do I recognize and understand what is the intrinsic, the one that's really going to, help me achieve the goal? So you've used, weight loss as an easy one. I think a financial goal might be another one that feels pretty extrinsic. What's the process of being able to move from the obvious, I want to make a lot of money, to here's my actual intrinsic aspect that will help me, achieve my life ambition, and the money might be the side effect of that? How is there a process to help you articulate those intrinsic goals a little bit better?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. What I typically will do with a client is, so let's say they bring up money or whatever. I'll start asking them questions, and this is someone can do this to themselves, obviously. Ask the question, why do you want to earn money? I mean, it's kind of might seem like a dumb question in some ways, but go with it. Why do you want to earn? Well, I want to take care of my bills. Well, is that the only reason? Why else? Well, I want to be able to go on vacations. Why do you want to go on vacations? Well, I want to spend time with my family or doing things that I enjoy. Okay, now we're starting to get closer to the intrinsic motivator.
Yeah.
That's when I'm working with a client, I'm looking for that. All of a sudden, oh, okay, now we're starting to edge upon, because they mentioned two things that are definitely much more intrinsic: spending time with family and doing things that I enjoy. And so then money becomes a tool, not an end goal. And so now we're going to rephrase the goal and say, I think what I'd like to do this year is spend more time with my family. Well, what would that look like? Or I'd like to spend more time doing things I enjoy. What would that look like? And going a little bit deeper. And that's where we can add the SMART goals too. We get real specific and measurable. But if you can start to ask those why questions and get to kind of this principle, value, intrinsic layers, you're going to start to scratch upon those goals that are actually going to last.
I love that. I appreciate it starts with the why, right? It starts with those why questions. Mm-hmm. And that allows you to dig down deeper. Very good. One more question that I think is interesting. Maybe you have an answer for. The person says, do you find that the emphasis on goal setting is found more in the United States with all of our pressure to succeed, et cetera, or is goal setting universal across most cultures?
I love that question because I'm super into culture. You can probably tell. It's actually more Western, not United States, but Western.
Yeah.
So Australia, most of Europe, UK, United States, definitely Canada. Then you have some cultures that are considered kind of blended cultures, which would be like South America, Central America, and then you definitely have Eastern culture. Eastern cultures don't do this really, unless they're Westernized.
Yeah.
Large companies like Toyota, has become westernized quite a bit, even though it started in Japan. And, the whole Six Sigma thing, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that was a very Western approach to an Eastern company that started in Japan. But I think what the question I'm guessing is reflecting on is, are there principles or elements we can take from other cultures that tap into this same approach of development and progress and things? And yes, I'm so glad. I love the question. So I am still a believer in goal setting. I think that's helpful. Sometimes an Eastern non-traditional approach to this is acceptance. It's saying I'm a whole person already. I'm a good person. That's kind of why I brought the shame guilt thing a little bit. A lot of us, when we get into goal setting, it's from this perspective that we're less than, that somehow we have to climb this ladder in order to improve our worth. I'm going to be very clear and bold on this. Everyone listening to this is 100% worthy, valuable already. There's nothing you need to do. Zero. If you have a goal, it's not to add value or worth to you as a person. You're already there. You're already there. You've already accomplished the most important goal you could ever have in your life, is being a worthy person. You're there. If you have a goal, it's to add enjoyment, connection, community, value, give back. That's why you're doing it. And so I love the question, because there's a strong element from that side of the world of acceptance of who we are. And I like that part.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's this opportunity to learn and to grow and to expand. And you've really been able to help us do that today, Jared. So thank you so much for your time and for your expertise, your wonderful examples. I loved how you shared firsthand experiences. But yeah, great stuff that I think all of us could take back and contemplate a little bit and help maybe focus us this time of year, especially as we are looking at a new year and some goals and seasons in our life and things like that. So once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
We also want to say thank you to each of you that joined us today. If you enjoyed the webinar today, then make sure that you tell a friend about it and let people know about the Living Your Best Life webinar series. Again, it's a series that covers a wide variety of different topics. I think you'll find something there for everyone. You can find previous shows right on our website at seniorgames.net. And in a few days, you'll be able to find this one there as well. Once again, seniorgames.net. Be sure to join us next month when we offer a very special show where we're going to feature Kelly Welker, who will be talking about starting the year off right by giving your body the fuel that it needs. This is going to take place on Wednesday, January 12th, 2022 at 11 a.m. until noon Mountain Time. And until we meet again, get out there and live your best life. Thanks, everyone.